This cold case was reopened after 46 years, and what police found was terrifying. For nearly half a century, the murder of 17-year-old Carla Walker haunted the city of Fort Worth, Texas. It lived inside dusty police files, unanswered questions, and the quiet grief of a family that never stopped waiting for justice. The case became one of hundreds labeled cold, slowly fading into obscurity as years turned into decades. But some crimes never truly disappear. They wait. In 2020, after 46 years of silence, a single phone call, a determined cold case detective, and a microscopic fragment of DNA would reopen one of Fort Worth's darkest chapters and finally expose a man who had hidden in plain sight for nearly 5 decades. At the center of the case was Glenn McCurley, a 77-year-old man suspected of kidnapping, raping, and killing multiple women and girls between 1967 and 1985. For almost 50 years, he lived freely. No arrest, no conviction, no punishment. When police finally approached him in 2020, they had no confession and no direct evidence in hand. Only suspicion and time that was rapidly running out. The reason the case survived at all was because one person refused to let it die. That person was Jim Walker. In 1974, Jim was only 12 years old when his older sister Carla disappeared. She was beautiful, intelligent, popular, and deeply loved. Jim admired her more than anyone else in the world. The night she vanished became the moment his childhood ended. Jim grew older, but the pain never softened. February 16, 1974, was supposed to be a joyful night. Carla had gone out on a Valentine's date with her high school boyfriend, Rodney McCoy. Rodney had spent months planning the evening. That night, he gave Carla a promise ring shaped like a rose, with a small diamond at its center. To Rodney, the ring symbolized loyalty and a future together. Carla accepted it with a smile. After exchanging gifts, the couple attended their school dance, laughing and spending time with friends. When the dance ended, they drove away together, looking for a quiet place to talk and be alone, something many teenagers had done before them. They didn't know they were being watched. As they sat inside Rodney's car, talking and kissing, the driver's door suddenly flew open. Rodney looked up to see a man standing there holding a pistol. Without warning, the attacker struck Rodney in the face with the gun over and over. As Rodney slipped in and out of consciousness, the man pressed the weapon close to his face and pulled the trigger repeatedly. The gun jammed. Believing Rodney was about to be killed, Carla begged the attacker to stop. She told him she would go with him if he left Rodney alive. It was a desperate sacrifice. The attacker agreed. As Carla was dragged from the car, Rodney heard her scream one final sentence through the chaos. "Rodney, go get my dad." Those were the last words he ever heard her say. Bloodied and barely conscious, Rodney managed to drive to the Walker family home. Jim was asleep on the couch when screeching tires and a crash jolted him awake. He ran outside to see Rodney staggering across the lawn, his face covered in blood. The passenger seat was empty. Carla was gone. By morning, Fort Worth police, sheriff's deputies, and FBI agents surrounded the Walker home. Rodney was immediately treated as the primary suspect. Rumors spread quickly, and suspicion followed him everywhere. Everyone doubted Rodney except the Walker family. They believed him completely. Rodney even stayed in Carla's room, sleeping in her bed. That was how deeply they trusted him. But public judgment was relentless. 3 days later, investigators remembered a similar case from the year before. A young girl named Becky Martin had been found murdered inside a cattle culvert outside the city. Search teams turned their attention underground. What they found ended all hope. Jim still remembers his parents entering one of the tunnels. Moments later, he heard his mother scream. Not a gasp or a cry, but a scream that carried pure devastation. Carla's body had been found inside the culvert. The city of Fort Worth mourned. More than 1,000 people attended her funeral. Rodney stood beside the Walkers, enduring silent stares and suspicion. As he approached Carla's casket one final time, something felt wrong. The promise ring was missing. Police later confirmed it had been found next to her body, removed and left behind. Why it was taken off and abandoned remains unexplained. Rodney broke down. After graduation, he left Fort Worth and moved to Alaska, not out of guilt, but because he could no longer live under the weight of blame and grief. For Jim Walker, grief transformed into obsession. As a teenager, he slept inside the culvert where his sister had been found, hoping her killer would return. He wanted to understand what Carla had endured in her final moments. Justice became his only purpose. Jim applied to the police academy and was accepted, but his future collapsed when doctors diagnosed him with a rare genetic condition that caused him to slowly lose his vision. He was going blind. His dream of becoming a detective was over before it began. Years passed. Jim's siblings moved away. His parents died, both believing they had failed Carla by never finding her killer. By 2020, Jim was the only Walker left in Fort Worth, alone, grieving, and still determined. Every year, he contacted the Fort Worth Police Department, begging them to reopen Carla's case. Most calls went nowhere. Then he reached Detective Leah Wagner, a newly assigned cold case investigator. She listened. Detective Wagner reopened the evidence boxes, untouched for decades. In 2009, a tiny DNA sample had been collected from Carla's clothing, but it was considered too weak to use. This time, they looked again. On Carla's bra, they found a single-source male DNA profile. The problem was the amount. Only 5 nanograms existed. Using it could destroy it forever. But Jim and the detective agreed. It was now or never. A private laboratory using advanced forensic technology analyzed the sample. It worked. The DNA produced a name: Glenn McCurley. Detective Wagner recognized it immediately. He had been suspect number 22 back in 1974. At the time, police had questioned all registered Ruger pistol owners. McCurley owned one. He passed a polygraph and walked free. For 46 years. He still lived in Fort Worth, just miles from where Carla was taken. McCurley refused to give a DNA sample voluntarily. So police waited. When he threw away his trash, investigators collected a McDonald's straw. The DNA matched perfectly. On September 21st, 2020, Glenn McCurley was arrested. During questioning, he partially confessed. When asked where he'd left Carla's body, he gave directions that didn't match the culvert. That raised a horrifying possibility. Carla may not have been his only victim. In August 2021, McCurley's murder trial began. Before the third day of testimony, he changed his plea to guilty. After nearly half a century, justice came suddenly. He was sentenced to life in prison. Rodney McCoy was officially cleared. Jim Walker wept. In a moment that stunned everyone in the courtroom, Jim did something no one expected. He approached the killer's son during the trial, carrying neither rage nor hatred, but a quiet, disarming calm. Instead of condemning him, Jim offered forgiveness. He told him plainly, "You are not responsible for the sins of your father," lifting a weight that was never his to carry. That act did not end when the trial was over. Today, Jim remains connected to Rodney, to the investigators who refused to let the case die, and even to the killer's family. His compassion became part of the story. Glenn McCurley, now known as the Valentine's Day Killer, is suspected in multiple unsolved murders. His conviction helped ignite new funding and renewed focus on cold cases across the country. Carla Walker's life was stolen, but because her brother never gave up, her killer was finally named. And after 46 years, justice finally spoke.